let's get to a little bit of situation monitoring.
Fears that the war with Iran may be resuming. President Trump says he believes the ceasefire
it is resuming. All right, I got to pee. I'll be back in a second.
Can continue after the U.S. and Iran traded dozens of attacks overnight. The U.S. says it struck more than 80 targets, while Tehran launched missiles and drones at Bahrain and Kuwait. Oil prices jumped on the news. This all comes as President Trump meets with NATO allies in Turkey. Ed O'Keefe joins us from Ankara. Ed, good morning.
Vlad, good morning. The strikes overnight appear to be the most extensive carried out by the U.S. since talks with Iran resumed less than 3 weeks ago. And while NATO leaders here are standing by the president for launching the attacks, their worst fears have been realized yet again, as he's once again questioning why the U.S. is a member of an alliance not willing to help with the war in Iran.
I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people.
President Trump opening the NATO summit by declaring, in his view, the agreement with Iran is off.
There's something wrong with them. They're cuckoo.
Appearing visibly angry, the president repeatedly criticized Iranian leaders.
They're liars. They're cheats. They're sick people.
His comments came hours after renewed U.S. strikes on Iran. Thick orange smoke seen rising over Bandar Abbas, home to Iran's main naval base. U.S. Central Command launched what it called a series of powerful strikes hitting more than 80 Iranian targets, including air defense systems, radars, and at least 60 small boats, all after the U.S. says Iran attacked 3 tankers in the Strait of Hormuz.
I think what you did last night was absolutely necessary. It was a very strong response.
Trump also revoked a waiver allowing the sale of Iran.
Mark Rutte is the biggest cuck on the planet. And I guess it doesn't really matter. He's not going to have a future career in anything. But he's burning his remaining credibility, or I guess he doesn't really have any credibility. This position doesn't require him to have any credibility either. So, oh God, Mr. Daddy, Mr. calling Trump daddy, Mark Rutte, sat there and was like, "You've done such a wonderful job blowing up Iran, Mr. President." Let me give you guys the summarization of the events that have unfolded in the Strait of Hormuz. So, for those of you who have been paying attention, for those of you that monitor the situation or enjoy the situation monitoring, so there's an MOU. Part of the MOU is about controlling the Strait of Hormuz. Who gets to control it? Iran wants to control it. There's only 2 pathways through the Strait of Hormuz. You can either go through Keshem and go through the Iranian ports, which means that Iran gets to continue controlling the Strait of Hormuz. But you can also potentially go through the Omani coastline. Now, Iran doesn't want America to send ships through the Omani coastline because Iran wants to maintain control over the Strait of Hormuz. There's a tremendous amount of leverage that they now have that they're not going to give up. And that's precisely at the heart of the MOU, beyond, demanding Israel restrain itself, or demanding America restrain Israel, rather, in its unlimited battles in Lebanon and its constant territorial expansion in Lebanon. And of course, predictably, the United States of America has tried to do its very best to transit ships through the Strait of Hormuz, offering them naval protection, offering them to the best of their ability, like anti-drone protection. And Iran doesn't like that. Iran has blown up ships that have tried to transit through the Strait of Hormuz from the Omani coastline. They did this last week. And when they did this last week, America responded with a what they called a proportional retaliation, while still maintaining the position that the conversations were ongoing. The memorandum of understanding was still being followed through. The ceasefire was still being followed through. Obviously, it's a complex situation. Why would there be a ceasefire if both sides are firing at one another? Whatever. This past weekend's interactions that took place 2 days ago, 3 days ago, when Iran shot 2 ships, or more than 2 ships, I think 4 ships, kind of changed that dynamic a little bit. And America, yesterday, in the last 24 hours, engaged in not just a proportional retaliation, but a retaliation that they called a punishment, right? Iran struck 5 ships trying to transit through the Omani coastline, and America retaliated by shooting Iranian positions, Iranian ports, and did not stop blowing up Iranian targets for an extended period of time. And before people say, why is Iran attacking ships that are transiting through the Strait of Hormuz by the Omani coastline? Because Iran has maintained the position, understandably, that gives them maximum leverage. Iran has maintained the position that they will control all the ships transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. Like, they get to have a say in who passes through. They've said that they will allow all ships to transit without any impediment, but they have to go through the Iranian coastline. That's it. The MOU is pretty clear on this, that the Omani route is not within the MOU's parameters. The Omani route is not within the MOU's parameters, and that all of the ships have to still go through the Iranian route, the Iranian coastline. So America's actually not following through on the MOU at all, right? And they're doing this deliberately. And the reason why they're doing this is because I think the United States of America wanted a little bit of respite, a little bit of ease on the oil and gas markets for a couple of weeks, because we were reaching critical supplies and critical shortages on the strategic reserves that have been released to make up for 20% of the entire globe's oil and gas needs. And part of that was also offering a release on the sanctions that previously existed for Iranian oil tankers. And those sanctions are back on as of yesterday. So those are the two major things that took place. The United States of America not only attacked Iran, and not in a proportional manner, by their own admission, in a manner that was seeking out a punishment and escalation. And then Iran has since then started attacking American military bases, American critical assets in Bahrain, Kuwait, and the like. And seemingly they will continue this tit for tat. Donald Trump in the process came out and said the MOU is done. No more dealing and wheeling with these people. These guys are, barbaric. They're animals, whatever. Trita does not support your reading. For him, the peace initiative was real, but shaky. Yeah, I think it was perfidy. Trita still, at the end of the day, works in D.C. He has a much more positive approach to these sorts of conversations than I do. I think he's overly optimistic. I think it was clearly an opportunity for America to release a pressure valve for a little bit and sell some Iranian oil in the market, in the global marketplace, so that they could normalize prices and combat the imminent crisis that was about to take shape. Here's J.D. Vance admitting as much on the Michael Knowles show.
There are a few things that we want. We want durable commitments that are verifiable and backed up by inspections that Iran will denuclearize their entire country. Okay, we're going to see how we get there. Number two, we want to see what kind of an arrangement actually exists in the Middle East between not just Iran and the United States, but the GCC, Israel, Lebanon. We're going to play that situation out. And then on the Strait of Hormuz, I think you actually said it well, which is that the strait is open in the sense that to oil traffic, we're seeing more oil come out of the Strait of Hormuz. And some days, actually, more oil coming out of the strait than came out before the war even started. So there's this element of the where the world oil economy is kind of getting back into gear. That's going to take a little bit of time, but you've already seen the prices come way down. Now, what the cynics will say is, well, if you look at the number of ships that are trafficking, that's actually down from the pre-war start. But they're mostly talking about cargo ships and other vessels. At least so far, what we've seen is the oil traffic has reached its pre-war height. So I think what the president has told us to do is use this MOU to sort of refill the world's oil economy, to refill some stocks, and then to see where the hand is. And
now here's the problem. This doesn't fix it. The only thing that can fix it is a permanent conclusion to the hostilities, a permanent cessation of hostilities, and allowing ships to transit through the Strait of Hormuz. This is the most consequential element of leverage that Iran has at their disposal. They're not going to give it up, and it doesn't make sense for them to give it up, especially when the United States of America has shown time and time again that the diplomatic route will only lead to perfidy. As a matter of fact, they're kind of showing it right now. So Iran knows, regardless of what the reformists versus the hardliners and their differences in opinion on the Iranian side, there is one reality that everybody understands, a reality that even a child can understand. They have to fight militarily and win militarily whatever autonomy, whatever sovereignty that they desire, right? For them, for the Iranian side, the calculation is simple. The Strait of Hormuz allows Iran to have tremendous leverage over the global energy markets, and it allows Iran to demand sovereignty, not by way of diplomacy, but by way of constantly having that threat, that leverage over the global energy markets, but where they could just say, look, we're going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz again if you try to fuck with us. It makes sense. It makes total sense. And given that the strategic oil reserves are at critical levels at this point, where they've basically dried out all around the world, especially in the Asian markets, but certainly even in the United States of America, they're reaching critical levels. This little moment of respite from the memorandum of understanding is only going to extend the timeline. But until there is one of two options, until America goes to war with Iran and this time around successfully defeats Iran militarily, something that they failed to do in the last 120 plus days, right? Or follow the path of diplomacy and concede on the demands that Iran is making. This is not going to go away. This problem is only going to get worse as a consequence of this back and forth. Joe Kent, former director of National Counterterrorism Center, leaned into the Brett Erickson analysis here. I'm gonna cover both. Okay. Joe Kent says, now that the MOU is effectively dead, as Brett explains below, we are back to attempting to find a military solution to the SOH. The problem is that we signed the MOU because there was no military solution and we needed the Strait of Hormuz open. Our best option is just to walk away. If we walk, Iran has no justification for targeting ships, and we can use sanctions relief as our carrot as opposed to risking a larger war in these ineffective tit-for-tat strikes. Brett Erickson, managing principal at Obsidian Risk, says, okay, he writes in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, WAPO, and Bloomberg. Brett Erickson talks about the sanctions waiver being taken away from Iran here, because that's the other side of the story. That's a very significant part of this conversation, because America didn't just strike back at Iran. America also took away the sanctions waiver that they had given to Iran so that Iranian oil tankers could trade in the global commodities market, right? This obviously allowed the markets to stabilize a little bit. But now that that's been taken away, there's market volatility once again. Okay? Before we get into that here, I'll show you, obviously, the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve is now at 19 million barrels, is critical. 19 million barrels away from estimated minimum operating levels. There will soon be no longer a safety buffer to protect the world from further losses out of the strait. Okay? This red line, once you reach this red line, you've reached a critically low level of supply. Okay? Given that this is a hard commodity that is necessary for survival, you know, we're talking about grid shutdowns. We're talking about the rest of the world looking like Cuba. Okay? You can't do that. There's nothing you can do. You can't, once the pedal hits the metal, you're cooked. This is during a heat wave. People will die as a consequence of this if we We'll start seeing rations. You know what I mean? It's certainly a moment to panic. Okay? Brett says, moments ago, the United States revoked the general license that lifted sanctions on Iranian oil. This is the other side of the story beyond the strikes on Iran that CENTCOM admitted was a punishment and an escalation. Unlike the previous strikes on Iran, when there was a tit for tat between ships transiting through the Omani coastline and then America punishing Iran or retaliating towards the Iranian centers that were launching drones and whatnot. The significance of this move cannot be overstated. It is a complete destruction of the memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran. Two things need to be highlighted right off the bat here. One, Washington had justification for doing this after Iran struck multiple vessels crossing the Strait of Hormuz via the Omani route in the last 24 hours. Two, this was an incredibly stupid move from Washington. Something I have highlighted since its original issuance on June 21st is the General License X is more politically damaging for President Trump than it is economically game-changing for Iran. While it could have resulted in a windfall of upwards of $1 billion for Tehran over the course of the initial 60 days, this is really inconsequential when compared to the massive damage their country has seen throughout the war. And that political damage for Trump, it already happened. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. He's already taken those blows. Exactly. And it, I think, wasn't that consequential. I think sanctions relief for Iranian oil in the last 60 days is not necessarily all that politically damaging. As a matter of fact, I think it normalized the markets and therefore it limited the amount of political damage he would receive at the domestic level because gas prices skyrocketing are far more damaging. Because Americans, by and large, don't pay attention to these sorts of things. And Donald Trump had already lost the war and had lost the battle. And therefore, he had already incurred the political damages of diminishing American force projection capabilities at the domestic level. At the international level, we have not even seen the beginning of that story yet, right? So the oil sanction waivers were the only notable upfront concession that Iran received for the joint lifting of blockades in the Strait of Hormuz. The frozen assets being released is orders of magnitude more important for Iran. But as of yet, not a penny has moved. It's not just the frozen assets being released that's important, because that's like almost $100 billion worth of frozen assets, and that's huge. That's a huge windfall. That is an absolute necessity. The $300 billion in additional economic aid that would come from the Gulf partners and maybe some American businesses also a big deal as well. But outside of that, the consequential element, the most consequential demand, aside from restricting Israel's behavior in Lebanon, was the removal of not just the secondary sanctions, but the primary sanctions as well. This would open up the Iranian economy to the rest of the world. This would be a huge deal, right? That's the biggest deal for Iran. That's what they want. That's the whole purpose as to why. Iran has even engaged in any sort of enrichment of uranium beyond civilian levels. It's a leverage that they've tried to maintain so they can draw America back to the negotiations process, so they can turn around and negotiate the release of all sanctions on the Iranian economy, right? So as of now, says Brett Erickson, not a penny has moved. I don't think that's correct. There was some money that was sent, for the record, to Iran by way of the United Arab Emirates. So I don't think that's also completely correct, but it's fine. This has been repeatedly confirmed by both Iranians and the Americans. What this revocation does accomplish is a complete and total destruction of the memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran. I do agree with that this is it's over. Like, they're basically saying the memorandum of understanding is done. We're lighting it on fire, right? This is far more detrimental to negotiations and an end to the permanent cessation of hostilities than a tit-for-tat response to to the vessel's strikes by Washington. This destroys the entirety of the MOU. Did Washington have some justifications for revoking this waiver? Absolutely. I don't agree with that either. Is this a catastrophic move for securing an enduring cessation of hostilities between the U.S. and Iran? Absolutely. I do agree with that. Was this an insanely foolish move from the Trump administration, given that the political blowback has already been received, the relative insignificance of this waiver, and the irreparable damage to the U.S.-Iran negotiations? Absolutely. He wrote these comments in Washington as well. He said that this is not a small step by Washington. This is a major step by Washington. Now, considering that Iran had valid reasons for assuming that America would not engage with them at the diplomatic level, given that they had received perfidy from the American and Israeli side over and over again during the previous bouts of diplomacy, sanctions relief, or at least a waiver, a general license for Iran to sell oil in the global marketplace, was supposed to be the first good faith, the first good faith concession that America could make. Okay? Them taking this away makes the reformers and the moderates on the Iranian side look completely ridiculous. Okay? How can you engage with a foreign adversary that's bombing you in good faith if they can't even abide by some of the initial principles? Because remember, this memorandum of understanding is to just bring them to the negotiation table so they can have a longer cessation of hostilities agreement. Okay? 131 days, and we're back to square one. A lot of the concessions, a lot of the demands being made for the memorandum of understanding were so that Ghalibaf and Arakshi and the other, diplomacy side could justify going to the table with America, as opposed to the hardliners on the IRGC side that recognized that the only way to deal with America was through hardware, through, military victories, by punishing the rest of the globe and stopping the transiting of oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, creating an international crisis where the rest of the world would blame the United States of America. That's where we're at. So now the ball is in Iran's court once again. But yeah, Joe Kent says America should walk away from this deal now that they've destroyed the memorandum of understanding, and then dangle sanctions relief as a carrot. Meanwhile, CENTCOM is also talking about removing their military assets and their bases entirely from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain, and then moving them to Israel. Completely misreading the situation. Why do you say that? Oh, you're saying America's completely misreading the situation. All I will say is this. If I'm an IRGC general and a hardliner who believes in the success of the military might of the IRGC, of the drone operations, I'm looking at the situation and saying, what other options do we have? Because even openly removing American assets from Bahrain and Kuwait and maybe even Saudi Arabia would be an admission, once again, and a concession that the Iranians already demanded regardless. Moving them to Israel would put Israel in harm's way and would give more justification to the Iranians as far as, moving the battle in the direction of Israel. Now, it's harder for Iran to strike Israel as opposed to striking Bahrain and Kuwait and the American assets in the region, certainly harder for them to do that. That's part of the reason why they haven't done it, right? But if Iran concentrates all of their attacks on Israel as opposed to the Gulf, I mean, that puts Israel in a harder position overall. So we shall see. But the question still remains. What can the United States of America accomplish militarily that they didn't in the last 130 days? Do they have a secret sauce, a secret recipe? Were they holding back? I don't think so. I don't think they were holding back at all. They went in with maximum pain, failed to establish air supremacy over Iranian soil, lost assets in the process. So I don't see the United States of America and Israel turning around and changing their strategy and actually achieving something militarily this time around that they couldn't in the last 130 days. That led to them begging Iran to come to the negotiations table, which Iran finally conceded on after America actually gave some significant concessions to Iran. The only thing that remains that the United States did not utilize was boots on the ground military warfare, or obviously nukes.
You know, as I've said this repeatedly, if the Iranians are willing to make the commitments that we would like them to make and are willing to back those up with verifiable milestones, then we are going to change our relationship with Iran. And if they don't do that, then nothing has really changed except for what we've already accomplished from the military campaign, which is a lot. Right. So we kind of have two options here. We have the option of pursuing a long-term deal with the Iranians, but that requires a significant change in their behavior. We have the option of banking our wins, and then, of course, doing things on top of that if the president feels that we have to. And I think both of those options are very much in play, and the president's going to let this play out. But what's happening right now is he's letting those options play out in an environment where there is significantly less pressure on the world energy economy.
But there isn't. The pressure valve is released only for a couple weeks at best. What now? What now? You get a moment of respite, but once again, one of the craziest parts about this is if we're talking about the domestic considerations, any kind of pushing the timeline back draws this conflict closer to the midterms. That is maximum pressure and maximum leverage for Iran during the American midterms election. Trump obviously doesn't want to go to prison. He doesn't want to go through the impeachment process. He doesn't want any accountability. And the more he pushes this crisis, this gas crisis, major energy crisis closer to the midterms, the more likely a Democratic blue wave becomes. We're not just talking about Maine in play. We're talking about races that previously weren't in play, potentially becoming races that are purple. We're talking Charles Booker might have a shot at becoming the next senator out of Kentucky. Okay? We're talking about significant flips, depending on how bad the pain gets for the average American. So what the are they thinking? Because he's buying us off. White House touts launch of 25 Freedom Fuel gas stations. I saw this. That's not going to help. That's not going to work. White House has launched 25 Freedom Fuel gas stations in an attempt to provide Americans cheaper options at the pump. Of course, once again, shady private corporation interference coming into play. The first Freedom Fuel Network gas station has landed in Philadelphia, lowering the price of the pump to $3.47 for our 47th president, the White House wrote on social media platform X on Tuesday. President Trump is leading the charge to lower gas prices this summer, putting more money in your pocket. By the way, stolen from Abdul, money in your pocket, money out of politics, Medicare for all. Anyway, these guys are very clever. 20 of the stations are located in Pennsylvania, while 5 are in New Jersey, according to the Freedom Fuel Network's website. A White House official told The Hill The Freedom Fuel Network is a private company and did not receive subsidies from the administration. The average price of a gallon of regular gas in those two states is roughly $3.98 and $3.86, respectively, as of Wednesday, according to AAA. The national average price of fuel is $3.79 per gallon as of Wednesday, AAA reported. The Hill has reached out to the White House Energy Department for further details on the new gas stations. In an accompanying video posted by the White House, multiple customers tout the new gas stations as helping them save money. One man said he was very happy about the cheaper fuel, while another girl remarked she was super pumped about the new options. Okay? Gas prices spiked in the early months of the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran after the Iranian military brought shipping in the Strait of Hormuz to a near standstill. Last year, nearly 34% of the world's crude oil passed through the waterway, with most exports going to Asia, according to the International Energy Agency. Here's the video of it, by the way.
Save money. I had to go back in and get my change. I thought gas was more expensive, but it's not. So thanks, Trump, for saving me some money.
We're here at the first Freedom Fuel Network gas station right here in Philadelphia, leading the charge to lower gas prices, $3.47. That's for our 47th president, President Donald J. Trump. The price of gas here is 50 cents lower than the Pennsylvania average gas price.
4th of July, gas prices are coming down, which is great.
I am very happy about the cheap gas prices.
Happy 4th of July.
Hopefully everyone has a great holiday. Super pumped the gas prices are lowered.
I'm just grateful. Right now, we're in a difficult time in this world, but it's nice to see some stability that we can enjoy.
Definitely appreciate the lower gas prices.
Oh yeah, definitely.
When I saw it, I thought it was fake news, but I'm glad it's true. I definitely couldn't believe my eyes. When I just rolled past, I'm actually taking a trip down the shore, so I wasn't even gonna come and get the gas, but I'm glad I did, because now it just saved me a lot of money. Thanks a lot, Trump. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a good job.
Thank you, President Trump.
Thank you for helping our country.
It's President Donald J. Trump leading the charge to lower gas prices right here at Freedom Fuel Network's gas stations.
I am not against government-owned gas stations. I am a socialist. I just don't think that this is going to do away with the national problem, however. So let's see where this goes. This is just another shady loss leader discount chain. They exist everywhere. Is this the Chud bread line? Kind of.
And this is my biggest frustration with right-wing critics of what we've done over the last few months in Iran, is that they don't realize how completely they were losing the political argument because of what was happening to world energy markets.
Yeah.
So what the President of the United States has done...
You're talking about the critics who want more bombs dropping on.
Their attitude is just drop bombs and drop bombs and drop bombs, and they can't really articulate to what end. And what the President is saying, I'm willing to drop bombs, and he's clearly shown that he's willing to drop bombs, but only if it serves an objective. And so what he's doing right now is taking a lot of pressure off of the world economy, the world energy economy in particular, while not giving up a single one of his gains and while preserving a lot of optionality. I think that's a very good place for us to be in, but there's uncertainty because no one can be certain what the Iranians.
No, the Iranians are the unstable party here and not Donald Trump. You know what I mean? It's very cool. But yeah, Trump now says the Iran ceasefire is over, folks.
Iranian oil on the world market. In response, a top Iranian warned the era of bullying and extortion is over. It leads nowhere. We don't fold. Iran retaliated with attacks of its own, saying it launched strikes on 85 American military targets in Bahrain and Kuwait. The attacks came during a pause in negotiations as Iran holds a massive days-long funeral for Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader killed on the first day of U.S.-Israel attacks on Iran.
We said, go and do your funeral stuff. And instead of that, they start shooting rockets at ships.
At the summit, the president also unloaded on alliance members for not doing enough to help the U.S. against Iran.
We protect them, but they're not there for us. Think of it. Doesn't work.
But the conflict in Ukraine is also a top concern. Trump says they're close to a deal with Russia.
It's too bad it took so long, but I think there's going to be something's going to come out.
Even as he meets with Zelensky, the president said the fighting between Ukraine and Russia doesn't affect the U.S. That's the kind of rhetoric that worries NATO members here in Europe, who are, of course, much closer to the war. The president also said again he's still interested in controlling Greenland. Remember that? He said European leaders' refusal to let the U.S. take control of Greenland is what's hurt his relationship with NATO. The world's largest island is, of course, controlled by Denmark, and its prime minister this morning reiterated Greenland is not for sale. Natalie?
Ed O'Keefe in Ankara, Turkey. Thank you.